Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. It's episode 2663 of The Tom Woods Show. Scott Morfield is our guest today. He's a columnist with Townhall, but he's been published all over the place. You type Scott Morfield into a search engine and you can spend quite a day learning an awful lot about a great many things. And that's exactly what I want to do actually today, is talk about a great many things. This is a bit of a potpourri episode as we catch up with Scott about things he's been talking about. But Scott, I wonder if we can start with, because there's plenty of stuff to talk about. We have to talk about, whites are evil and should hate themselves and their ancestors. There's a big, long thing. But on a somewhat serious note, very serious note, you wrote something about the death of your father. And it was an opportunity to reflect on other people having experienced the death of relatives during the terrible COVID years and what that was like. But let's start with this. I'm sorry about this terrible news.
Thank you, Tom. It was it's difficult. I mean, the hard thing, something like this, everybody goes through it. Everybody loses their parents. So I had to remind myself I'm not special. We went through something that everybody's going to go through. We're all going to die ourselves. But going through it the way we did, and what I wrote about it, and not everybody gets a good death, and it's really, with him, he got to die surrounded by his family, by his grandkids, telling them that they love him, and he got to say he loved us. And the hospital staff were so kind. And in the ICU, usually the rule is 2, and that's it. But when they knew the time was coming, they said, "Just come on, everybody, just come on." And so we were there, and there's something just obviously spiritual and holy and profound about watching someone die, especially someone that you love like that. And it changed me, and it changed all of us. And I just kept thinking back because, you and I and a lot of people of our friends were COVID dissidents, during the, 5 years ago. And it just, after going through what we went through, and it was there was closure, and there was just, it was just incredible in just such a unique way. And the system robbed so many people of this during that era. And it just made me really mad when I thought about that, because, you don't have real empathy I had empathy when I wrote about it then. It's like, oh, that sounds horrible. It's horrible. I can't believe you had. But when you kind of sense that when you go through a death, and this was the first real significant death I've had to experience in my life as far as just close family. But when you experience it like that, you really get empathy for the people who were, the 80-year-old who had to sit outside his wife's hospital room and hold a sign while she died. Just all those kind of stories. And that's what I wrote about with that column. And it just gives you a new hatred for what they did to us. I got caught up in the masking and the vaccine mandates, and that's just horrible. But this was crime level stuff, what they did to people. So yeah, that's, turned it into kind of thinking about that.
How sudden was it? Did you know it was coming?
He was sick. We knew he was having, he was a Vietnam vet, and he was exposed to Agent Orange over there, and he worked on the railroad. After that, he was in the Air Guard. Just a boomer con to the core, just a great guy. But he he was starting to get liver failure and issues with that. So he had cirrhosis, and he started getting this varicose veins where they would just bleed internally. And they had saved him a couple of times, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And they brought him to the hospital this last time, and they stopped the bleeding, and they had like 15 doctors and nurses in there just stopping the bleeding that final time. And he had the whole weekend in there just to visit with us as a normal. I mean, we could say our goodbyes, we could talk, about life and all those things. And, it was really special. And I'm thankful for them for being able to do that, but we also had at some point, it was just, there was no way to keep sealing it up. So when he played internally for the final time, that was going to be up. So they knew.
I don't think I've ever really talked about this myself, and we'll as soon as I'm done with this, we'll move on to the kinds of topics I think people are expecting. But
Sure.
The death of my own father was nearly 30 years ago. It was in 1996, and it was very sudden. No one expected it. No one. It was to the extent that these things can be flukes. That's what we were looking at. It absolutely shouldn't have happened. And I remember getting a call from my mother saying, "Dad's had a heart attack. You need to come home, and you should probably bring a suit." And I mean, that's horrifying. He hung on a little bit after I got back, but not very long. And I remember at that moment thinking, thank goodness this isn't one of these family alienation stories where I never got to tell him what I needed to tell him kind of thing, because he had just dropped me off in graduate school not 2 weeks earlier. And, I shaken his hand, and we were on the best terms we could possibly be on. So I had no regrets or no unsaid things or anything like that. But, up to that time, I had not had anybody close to me pass away. And then suddenly, one of the core people of my whole life was just gone just like that. I fear uttering platitudes about this, but you know what? I think in situations like this, you're reduced to that. I have nothing profound to share other than it is stunning how fragile it is, and how quickly your life can be turned upside down, and there be a missing piece. I mean, my father never got to meet any of my children. That's not how it was supposed to work out.
He never saw you become Tom Woods,
No, he didn't. No, he didn't. But
yeah.
I'll tell you, boy, he would have enjoyed watching.
He would have loved that. Yeah, no doubt.
The thing is, I would have had to call him off because he would have wanted to go after my enemies, and I have to say, Dad, that's half the fun of being me, is smashing my enemies. Like, don't take that from
but
me.
You do that. Well,
let me do that.
It underscores the importance of just leaving nothing on the table, like you said. Just leaving nothing on the table. And I remember even like 2 months before he passed, we took a trip to Gatlinburg or Pigeon Forge or something. Just to have a weekend with them, with Mom and Dad, and we took them with us. We always like to take them on trips, and they just love being grandparents. And he went. Yeah, that was one of the hospital trips that scared me. And after that, I wrote a letter to him, an email, just in an email, because he was getting hard to hear, and just lay out, just all the feelings that just all the father-son stuff, just how much I appreciate him being my dad. And that was really cool because he wrote me back, and just being able to have that closure was special. So my advice to anybody would just be, don't let anything, just leave everything on the table no matter what, because life is precious, just like you said, and it's short.
Well, let's shift gears a bit, and I want to get your thoughts, because you do write for a number of outlets, and you move in, a few different, let's say, right of center circles. And in the wake of this whole matter with Israel and Iran and Trump, there was for a conflict that lasted such a brief amount of time, it generated an enormous amount of commentary and invective and controversy and mutual recrimination, and personalities attacking each other and so on. And in light of it, and what we saw, I think some fault lines developing that maybe we knew were there, in which we saw some people who, as we were getting little hints from the tea leaves as to which way Trump was leaning, there were people who were making absolutely sure that they had to be leaning exactly that way. And so there were some parts of it that were not particularly edifying, let's say. And there was a moment, I mentioned this a couple episodes ago, at which Laura Loomer warned that Trump is watching, and that there are going to be a lot fewer influencers invited to the White House from now on. And I thought, what? This is so foreign to the world I inhabit, where it never occurs to me, if I flatter the regime, maybe I will be recognized by it in some way. This thought doesn't cross my mind. If they do something good, I say so. And if they do something bad, I say so. And that's how I live. I don't have to think this way. And then meanwhile, we have Thomas Massey being attacked. So we have some people defending him, but some people attacking him, either because they genuinely think he deserves it or because they want to do what Trump wants. Who do you think are the different, I don't mean individuals, like how would we break down who are the different groups making up like you have the never Trumpers who weren't going to support him anyway, but they did support this. I haven't found a single never Trumper who was against the strikes on Iran. If you were trying to introduce the American right to a Martian, in light of what we've just seen in particular, how would you do it?
It's really strange. The whatever era it is, the friends and enemies are not the same, or opposition. The friends and the opposition. So Laura Loomer is one, of course. So I mean, it's totally predictable. I think you've got people who are just opportunists and who just want to be around power. So you've got that, and I think in that situation, whatever way Trump is leaning, they're going to do. We know who. I mean, there's neocons who. Mark Levin was a really interesting one because he's so good on a lot of things. He's articulate and whatnot. And then he says, I don't know if you saw the tweet where he's going to look into. We really need to find out if J.D. Vance urged caution in this.
Yeah.
I mean...
not only did I see that, Scott, I responded to that. I said, we do need to find out because it would show that we had at least one sane person around. I don't think that's the reason Levin wants to get to the bottom of it, though.
No, that's not. And it's just, it just makes you wonder. And it's almost, now there is a segment that with this war in particular, so we might be with most of conservatism agrees on Ukraine, I think, for the most part, unless you're just a complete neocon. But when you start touching on Israel, you're going to get a whole different level of vitriol if you're perceived as being anti-Israel. And I think a lot of that comes from Christian Zionism, if you're a Christian, and it comes from, of course, their religion, if they're Jewish, and they have a right to support Israel, of course. I don't blame them at all. But I think that they're very, very, very touchy on that. And you can't really reason in that way without being called names. And it's bizarre because, I mean, I didn't publish, actually. I wrote a column on Christian Zionism. It was mild, very mild. I was raised in a church. I was raised a fundamental independent Baptist, all right? So that railed against Hollywood movies, dancing, wearing shorts, shedding season for women in the summertime. Like, it was just an old-fashioned church, fantastic people. But the way that they talk about Israel is almost hushed, like they would talk about Jesus or the way a Catholic would talk about the Virgin Mary. It's very much a part of the religion. And if you don't see past that and you see that as a core theological belief, we have to bless Israel. We have to, and all things, basically, we have to, they'll say, oh, we don't have to agree with Israel and everything. Well, yeah, you really do.
You do.
They do. Yeah. And you can't criticize. And so if you're in a theological camp like I am now, that, more, they call it replacement theology, but just, hey, it's pretty common sense.
It's just traditional Christian theology.
Traditional Christianity. Yeah, you're an anti-Semite. Well, no, I've got Jewish friends. You've got Jewish friends. I don't have anything against Israel whatsoever. I hope they succeed. I mean, they're a first world bastion in the third world, or the second world. in the middle of radical Islam. Like, you can make a case for Israel without making it religious, and you can if you want to make a case for war, don't use the Bible as, or your view of prophecy as the means behind it. Like, that's not our business anyway. Even if they're right and dispensationalism is right, which I don't think it is. Even if it is right, I don't think they should be making a case for war based on that. Like, that's up to God.
Hey, gang, if you're worried about the value of your hard-earned savings getting eaten away by inflation, trade wars, or reckless Fed policy, it's time to secure and grow your wealth in something they can't inflate away, and that's gold. But a lot of gold owners just buy gold and then let it sit there collecting dust, and then feel like they're missing out on the growth happening in other asset classes. That's why I lease my gold with Monetary Metals. I can earn a 4% annual yield paid in gold every single month while still owning my ounces. Again, the yield you earn is paid in ounces of physical gold, which you get in addition to any price appreciation from gold during the year, which, as you know, continues to break all-time highs in 2025. Join me and thousands of happy clients who are earning a gold income every single month. This is a no-brainer for those looking to earn an honest return in honest money. The Fed can print dollars, they can't print gold. Now's the time for you to start growing your wealth in ounces. Go to monetary-metals.com/woods to learn more. That's monetary-metals.com/woods. Yeah, this is obviously starting to come to a head. So I did an episode on this some time ago with a Lutheran theologian. Now, I'm not a Lutheran, but on the theology of this question, I think Lutherans and quite a few Christians are pretty much in agreement. Now, there are a lot of ways you can answer this, and as I said, I did an entire episode on the theology of it, but a simple one would be, we're told that, so by Israel, they mean that when they read Israel in the Bible, they mean the country that was created in 1948 that exists there. That's Israel. Now, theologically, that's highly suspect because there's a much broader view of what Israel is in the New Testament. But all the same, the problem is we're being told that if you will be blessed if you bless Israel. If you support Israel, you'll be blessed. But when I look at the state of the United States, and I look at it from the point of view of the very Christians who are telling me about this blessing, it doesn't look like it's been blessed. You look at the social history of the U.S., you look at social issues, you look at the state of the churches, you look at, by any metric whatsoever, the trans movement, the state of the public schools, you just go on and on and on. The health of the country is obviously much worse. So if this is a blessing, what would the curse be?
That's a great question.
And the other thing is, I was just dealing with somebody who was on Thomas Massey's thread, on a Thomas Massey X thread, and Massey was just basically making an America First argument about Israel, and the person said, "Do you realize that you're causing God to curse us by taking this position?" So, you can't have a rational argument with somebody like that.
No,
if I take this position, I'm causing God to curse us. And so I was saying, well, by what metric have we not been cursed for the past, since, let's say, I don't know about 1948. There has been, Truman obviously supported Israel, but it got, the support got much, much more intense over the years. So let's say, I don't know, from the 60s onward, does this look like a country that's had nothing but blessings? I'm not convinced of that.
Some people would say, if you're on the cultural left, you would say it's been blessed, but I don't think that's what the religious right are trying to argue. So yeah, that's a great point. And you bring up points like that to somebody and they can you can change minds. It is possible to change minds, but they have to be able to listen to you. The crazy, I'm sorry, there was something, when I said, I wrote a column on Christian Zionism. I couldn't even get it published with anybody that I've ever worked with or work with now. And it was so mild. So conservative media, for the most part, is pretty captured with this. There's not, and you can't make a reasonable argument. You can't make a mild argument. Like it's captured. And it's interesting because even the like the Presbyterian Church, which I'm a PC, the conservative Presbyterian. I'm trying to think of the name now, but anyway, the Presbyterian Church typically does not teach dispensationalism, but it has been captured in so many other ways. It's bizarre.
All right, I've got a bunch of things here. I got to do a whole other episode on that topic one of these days. Right now, well, okay. So, but I guess I was talking about in terms of who's in the conservative movement right now. So I don't know. I guess the Never Trumpers would be part of it to some degree.
Yeah, truly.
Then we have like the hardcore Trump people who are like Trump right or wrong, or they probably won't concede that he's ever wrong. Is the thing. You can't even get them to concede that.
Cult of personality.
Yeah. So we have that. But then what else have we got? I mean, we certainly have like a libertarian leaning streak. We have the Thomas Massey wing, I guess if that's a wing. Presumably, we've got some opportunists who just will sway with whoever happens to be, in the saddle. But then, I don't know. Like, is there still a Mitt Romney contingent out there? I don't know. I mean, are they just the Never Trumpers?
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, do you think that the conservatives are more fractured than the left?
It feels like that because the left is pretty fractured on Israel is a big thing. They're pretty fractured on that. They're that's probably the biggest issue, I guess. But they still know how to come together, and they're going to vote blue no matter who when it comes time for the general. And we did that with Trump, and I'm actually a little. I was tickled you had me on because I was so ghastly wrong the last time I was on with you, trying to argue that Trump couldn't possibly win. And I was sure of it. I was as sure of that as anything, and he won. But yeah, I just didn't think even if he won, and we're starting to see that a little bit now. Like, can he keep all the factions together? So, like on the Iran situation, like we were frustrated with him even doing anything. Like we felt like he shouldn't do anything. But what he did do was about as little as could be done and still declare victory. So I thought that was smart. So he kind of unified. I mean, yeah, you got Mark Levin and Lindsey Graham saying more should have been done, but they're still behind Trump. So he managed to keep everybody together on that for the most part. Like I don't know. I haven't, maybe somebody like a Dave Smith maybe just done with Trump now. I don't know, on that. But I think I can see him. Okay, we're going to be Teddy Roosevelt. We're going to carry a big stick. We're going to walk softly. We're not going to have boots on the ground. We're not going to have a crazy long regime change war, which is, they said the right things on that. I think he's got a lot of good people in his ear on that stuff. But he also, to his view, he's not us. He had to do something. So I think doing what he did was probably kind of a good middle ground to keep his base together. So he's keeping everybody together so far, and I didn't think he would.
Yeah, well, I mean, he can't keep doing this.
No.
That's for sure.
No.
Because it's frayed. It's frayed now, and I think also it's becoming clear, particularly to younger people in this, whatever this whole movement is, that the subject of Israel is obviously not going away, and that is more a point of contention than it's ever been. I mean, like since 1948 on the right, it's more of a contention point than it's ever been. And there's no easy resolution in sight because you have some people who are obviously taking the position on Israel they take because they're Jewish. I mean, this is obvious. Like, this is not controversial. This is obvious. If I'm Armenian and I support Armenia, everybody knows that's part of the reason. Like, it's not controversial. But other people are supporting it because of religious reasons, because of dispensationalism. But there are a lot of people who are concerned that Israel is causing more problems for the U.S. than it's solving, let's say, and that's not going away. And for some people, I think it's almost to the point where Israel is like they're becoming single issue voters. Like, that's the most important thing to them. So I don't know where this goes. I don't know how the right doesn't get fractured. But then I look at the Democrats and I realize they're on the verge of the same thing because their older donors want to keep the status quo, and the young people have absolutely no appetite for Zionism whatsoever. None.
Yeah, they're done with it. It feels like. I mean, and as the Schumers retire, they're going to be replaced by the people like the AOCs and the New York City mayor and the mayor-elect and people like that. But on both sides, and that's one thing. Like the anti-war left and right, it's almost like a circle. It's interesting how we coincide with them a little bit in that way, and we can find some common ground, which is nice. But the more that Israel is perceived as trying to bait us or get us into war, that's not a good look. Like, I've got no issue not restraining them. I mean, I don't think we should be funding them or giving them weapons. I mean, I don't think we should be. But if we weren't doing that, then there's a lot of people that say, I mean, on our side, they say, hey, just leave us alone. Even if you're not funding us, leave us alone and let us do what we want to do in the region or need to do, feel like they need to do in the region. So if they need to strike Iran every few years, then do it, but don't try to drag us into it. And I think when they're trying to do that, that's a red line for a lot of people, especially young people. It's very difficult to get around that. Nobody wants to fight another war.
Yeah. There's the appetite for that is pretty limited. But on the other hand, with this thing, it's short. Trump is insisting that it's a full victory. He's insisting on that, even though there is some question about
mission
that.
accomplished.
Yeah, right, exactly. From the point of view of of what he would consider to be victory, he's saying that was accomplished. There's some doubt about that, but regardless, that's the way he's putting it. So it could look to the average voter like, well, you might not like his methods or the way he speaks, but doggone it, this guy gets things done and he's swift about it. And it's so, it wouldn't surprise me if he came out with a net plus at the end of this. But as I say, I think in so doing, I think he did put a major crack into his own base. So let's switch gears altogether here. You had a column not long ago about what you call a psyop on the part of the left that involves, in effect, making white Americans in particular, but I suppose also Europeans, feel guilty about their ancestors, feel guilty about the ills of the world, and like we all know about this. Like this isn't some secret. We all know this is everywhere. Everywhere. You can't honor this person because of that. You can't honor that person because of this, and it's got to the point where it's tiresome, but I would say in general, most Americans roll their eyes and put up with it. But what was the context for you bringing that up?
Yeah, there was one of the things that made me think of it just in that context was Matt Walsh, who's been really on fire lately.
Matt Walsh is better than I've ever seen him.
I know, just fantastic. And he was talking about that basically, what is wrong with wanting if you're a white person, what is wrong with wanting white people to survive, like to reproduce, so you got the birth rate of, Europeans and white Americans and white Europeans are reproducing is it like 1.3? Like it's really low. It's very low. And in the third world, they're reproducing at rates that are extremely high. So white people, I think the average white liberal is sitting in the middle of Vermont thinking, gosh, all I see is pasty people, these white people. But really, white people are a global minority. And the PSYOP has been, it's almost like the only countries that are supposed to accept unlimited immigration with no strings from everywhere are traditionally majority European or European American countries. Canada, United States, Europe, Australia. Those are the countries that have to produce that have to let in non-white immigration with no limitations. So they've convinced the leaders of that because of guilt, because everything in human history everything evil has been propagated by white people because of colonialism, because of slavery, all these things. And they give the Arabs a pass for slavery and colonialism, and the Chinese, they get a pass, but white people don't get a pass. So they've convinced the average white person to feel guilty for what their ancestors have done. And even though in reality it's the opposite, like we should be proud of what our ancestors have done, not saying that proud of the bad things, but just recognizing that every group has done bad things. And the order of human history for the last 10,000 years has been conquest. One group fighting against another group for resources and enslavement. Horrible. And things have gotten better the last 100 years. But that is in huge part thanks to Western civilization coming to, taking the lead on this and saying we can do things a different way. And that's, of course, spurred by Christianity and the whole worldview, a Christ-centered worldview there. So I don't understand what we should feel guilty about. I really don't. And that's the psyop.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's a slight chance, I tell you, you're not being told the full truth. For instance, they tell you to max out your 401k and IRA, and then they make you beg for permission to use your own money. They tell you to defer paying your taxes by saving in a 401k or IRA because you'll retire in a lower tax bracket. But if that were true, why are so many retirees in the highest tax bracket of their lives? It's time to get the truth and discover a better way to grow and protect your money. Bank on Yourself is the proven retirement plan alternative banks and Wall Street desperately hope you never hear about. It gives you, among other things, guaranteed, predictable growth and retirement income with no luck, skill, or guesswork required. Your plan doesn't go backward when the markets tumble. Your principal and growth are locked in. You're in control. You get access to your money for emergencies and opportunities with no questions asked. There are no government penalties or restrictions on how much or when you can take it. And when you use your money, it keeps growing like you never touched it. Try doing that with a 401k or IRA. And perhaps the best reason of all, you'll know the minimum guaranteed value of your retirement savings on the day you plan to tap into them and at every point along the way. You can get a free report with all the details on how the Bank on Yourself strategy adds guarantees, predictability, and control to your financial plan. Just go to bankonyourself.com/woods. That's bankonyourself.com/woods. The people who are critical of European civilization or the United States or both are using a moral language that has European origins. That for instance, the very idea that a society like Spain could, which Spain indeed did, could turn an inquisitive moral eye to what Spaniards in the New World were doing, some of the bad things that they were doing, and render a moral judgment on them and say there is a universal standard of justice that applies to all people, including ourselves, and we've fallen short of that. Well, that's what the left is saying today about Europeans of the past. What they don't realize is that that's not the norm. Like the very peoples they're defending today, the natives who lived in America, they weren't engaged in moral introspection about their own behavior toward other peoples. This thought would never have occurred to them. I pointed out that Samuel Eliot Morison, who is an old Harvard historian, points out that when you look at native tribes in North America, and particularly I think he was thinking of the northeastern, what later became the United States, that they would have like the same word for member of another tribe that they would have for the word enemy, or that they would refer to these other peoples as son of the she-dog, which is not particularly flattering, a little bit dehumanizing, I think. Now, when you think of other peoples that way, how is it possible for you to evaluate your behavior vis-a-vis them according to a universal standard of justice? This thought would not occur to you. So the very moral language you're using to condemn the Europeans is a gift of Europe to the civilization of the world. But this doesn't enter the old noodle, let's say.
They should be thanking Western civilization, not
and they don't.
No, they hate it. They see it as an obstacle to their power,
And yet they always seem to want to live in a civilization created by or deeply influenced by the very people they hate.
Strangely.
I wonder why that is.
Yeah,
They seem to be good at creating societies people want to live in.
Yeah, exactly. And if they deep down, if they want that to continue, then it doesn't make sense to demographically overwhelm all the white countries. It just doesn't make sense. Like, it's one thing, like, not advocating for white nationalism or something like that. That's not what we're saying at all. But at the same time, like, it matters who the majority is in a country, and you can't replace the entire population of Minnesota prior to 1990 or whatever with the entire population of Somalia and think that it's going to stay the same, because it's not. So people create culture.
This is obvious to everyone.
Yeah.
This is obvious to everyone. This is in large part why they favor the migration patterns that they favor.
Right.
It's why they favor it.
It's why they got so upset about South Africa. The South Africans who came here, 50 of them. You would have thought that we were letting in 50,000 into their house or something. It was bizarre.
Yeah. If it was a bunch of Scandinavian violinists trying to get in, I guarantee you they would lose no sleep about this. Absolute 1,000% guarantee. All right. The potpourri continues. I got one more thing I want to ask you about, because I keep hearing about this and I'm too lazy to read about it. So I want you to explain it to me. You have a column on ranked choice voting. Can you once and for all explain? I mean, I think I have a sense from the name what that means, but what would that look like? And is there any prospect of it being implemented at any level?
It's ranked choice is basically like you pick your top 5, or so you'll have, like, maybe you're in a primary. And really the advocates from the right are mostly saying in a primary. Okay, so in a primary election, you go in and you rank your choice. Say there's 5 candidates, you rank them 1 to 5. Okay, so if you rank the most obscure candidate first, and so then everybody does this. Okay, so then the computers tabulate it at the end, and the first candidate to fall out to get the fewest number 1 spots, that candidate is eliminated, and all the votes for number 1 slide down to the second choice for that person. So if that person voted for the obscure candidate, then they were now voting for their second choice because that obscure candidate's already eliminated. And it keeps repeating all the way until the best candidate comes out on top. So it's basically an average. It's like, if somebody gets really a lot of number 1s, but not a majority of number 1s. Now, if somebody gets a majority of number 1, you win. All right. So regardless. So like the ranked choice they did with the New York City Assembly, that guy got like 56% number 1. So he won anyway. So he was a good he was a solid candidate. But what this does is it prevents people, it prevents somebody from just sliding in, and maybe a bad candidate wins a primary that can't win the general. In general, you're going to have a better shot at bringing in a good candidate. So the best example of this is Virginia with Glenn Youngkin. He was able, and Virginia, I get that Glenn Youngkin is a little bit of a moderate, and he may not be somebody we would pick if we were choosing between. I can't remember the other candidate that had the best shot that we would have liked better probably. But she would not have won the general. There's no way against McCulloch, because Virginia is a purple state. So the fact that Youngkin was able to pull this off in ranked choice, like he was just likable enough to win it. And then he went into the general and won. So the idea is it helps us get the best candidate, and it keeps spoiler. In a general election, it keeps spoilers out. So if you implemented this in a general, then the spoilers, like the Constitution Party, say we voted Constitution Party number 1, well, they got eliminated. Well, our second choice now counts. So it keeps the spoilers from spoiling an election, basically. That's the idea.
But I've heard it said that this could somehow help a Ron Paul, and the reason for that would be that a lot of people might say, well, I don't think anyone's going to vote for him, even though I like him. So I'll vote for Mitt Romney because I think he's the winner. But if they have ranked choice voting, they can say, but since I do like Ron Paul, for my second choice, I'll vote my conscience and vote Ron Paul. Couldn't it work that way?
Yeah, or the opposite. You could say, hey, I'm going to vote for Ron Paul because I want to hope he wins, but then I'll put Romney second. It might give you a little bit of leeway there in your mind, like, well, my vote will still count regardless. So it could help either way. So if a candidate is strong enough, and Ron Paul was strong in a lot of areas, then if a campaign is strong enough and a candidate is strong enough, then they're going to pull it out. And if they're not, they're not with this system. So, I mean, I like it. It's up in the air. We have yet to see it on a mass scale, but it has been, with Virginia being the best example of using that in that slice there. I mean, it's promising. It could be promising. So just, I like to delve into different things as experiments. So, that's kind of one of those things that.
Yeah, look, I mean, nothing else works.
Yeah.
So occasionally maybe a structural change, might move the needle at least somewhat. I mean, sometimes people say, well, there's no point in amending the Constitution because we know that they'll just misinterpret it again. And of course, I agree with that. I mean, just changing the words probably isn't going to do anything. But if you change the structure, like for instance, if you were to say, let's say if 10 states officially declare that they believe a federal law is unconstitutional, then we temporarily suspend that law until we hash this out. Something like that. Well, that's a structural change, and that actually could maybe do something. That's just why I don't close the door to that altogether.
Another interesting one is, and I don't know, you may completely disagree here, but the Electoral College is an interesting one because how do we know right now you have a situation where only a few states get all the promises. So if you live in Pennsylvania or Michigan or Wisconsin or Georgia, you're going to get all the campaign promises because why did Las Vegas this no tax on tips thing? Well, that's because Trump wanted Nevada. So if you have a situation where you're just trying, what the map is, it's obvious what it is, and then people demographically try to tip the scales in a certain state. So maybe in Texas, if we can get enough Hispanic immigration, then we can tip it blue or whatever. And they play these games with it. So there's an argument that the Electoral College is not the greatest right now, and under what we're at, under the system that we're at now. So if you had a situation with just popular vote across the board, now you would have to make sure everybody is following the rules and not, you wouldn't want to have states that can just allow unlimited number of voters anymore because that damage. So you have a lot of caveats to this. But how do we know if you're in California and you're a conservative, why would you vote? You're no wonder they don't even try because there's no point. And Nebraska, or if you're a liberal or whatever, or if you're a conservative in Nebraska, you might think my state's going Trump. Why am I going out to vote? We have no idea. So if we had the best ideas, why wouldn't we be able to win a popular vote? I mean, Trump won a popular vote under.
Yeah, no, I get it. But I guess what I would say is that the specific problem you're talking about, whereby particularly a handful of particular states get all the attention, isn't solved by that problem because those states are still major population centers, and I could still win the election by just going to California, New York, one or two others. Even on the basis of a popular vote, I could still do that.
It's true.
So at least with the Electoral College, there's a cap on how much support California can give you,
how much damage they can do.
Yeah. So I mean, I totally hear what you're saying. I feel like this is probably a matter of the human condition, rather than something that we can entirely fix structurally. But I agree with you that there's a lot of frustration, living in a state that is going to go one particular way, one color.
Yeah.
And you feel like, well, what's the point? Why do I even bother?
I hear it all the time. Yeah, you hear my vote's not going to count anyway, so who cares? Whatever.
But what's even worse in a way is when we have states that are dominated by the one city.
Yes.
And so like on state level things, we sometimes misconceive what political affiliation really is in a place like New York. We think, oh, New York is a blue state. Well, it's a blue city with more redness in it than you realize, but they're totally dominated by that darn city.
Giant
And
city.
same thing for Oregon. There are parts of Oregon that really, really don't like Portland, but that's the arrangement. So I'd like to see the borders be more fluid and have a greater Idaho. Let those parts of Oregon get out of there, get out from under the thumb of Portland, and operate as a part of, because there's nothing cast in stone about these arbitrary lines. They weren't handed down to us from heaven. They're a practical arrangement, and we should rearrange them if it makes people happy.
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. I mean, people should have a right to determine their own destiny. That's what West Virginia, West Virginia broke off from Virginia, whatever. I mean, that's something that, people should have that. And if you have, the government that they want, it's just, we're afraid in Tennessee that Nashville's going to get so big that Tennessee's going to turn blue. So it's a little scary, because when you have a popular city that's growing really, really fast, well, it don't take that many to start turning things.
That's true. So you're in Tennessee?
Yes, sir. East Tennessee.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I have a bunch of friends there, and I thought about, because I'm doing the opposite of what everybody else does. Everybody retires in Florida. I want to retire away from Florida.
You should retire to Tennessee. You love it.
Oh, Tennessee is wonderful. We seriously considered it. But by the way, I'm not really going to retire. Like, what do I do for a living? I'm not really going to retire. But still, where I would want to go when my kids are all finished with school and stuff, where would I want to wind up? Tennessee is definitely up there. And how far from Nashville are you?
About 4 hours.
4 hours.
Yeah,
okay.
No, I live in Bristol, which is right on the Virginia-Tennessee border. So it's kind of interesting, because even during COVID, you had the Virginia side closed, and there's a street, the main street runs right across down the border. So you had the Virginia side closed and the Tennessee side open. And then for a while there, the Virginia side could eat outside, so they had all their tables out. We're just like over here on the Tennessee side, like, what are you guys doing over there? So they did it made national news because of that. But Bristol's a great place, the birthplace of country music. So it's a nice place.
Well, I was going to ask you, because I do murder mystery dinner parties around the country, and last year I did like 8 of them. It was too many. So this year so far I've scheduled only one, but it's in Nashville in October. So if you were a little closer, I was going to invite you to be part of that. But everybody else listening, woodsmystery.com. If you're in the Nashville area, you should sign up to be part of that. So these are wonderful evenings we have together. Scott, if people want more Scott Morfield, what's the best way for them to get it?
For now, my Townhall archive, and X. So X, it's SK Morefield, and then just my Townhall archive. I've written several other places, but just ignore the stuff when I was bashing Trump, because I just didn't think he could win.
Well, we'll get those links put up at tomwoods.com/2663, also in the video description. Scott, I appreciate your time today. Thanks a million.
Thank you, Tom. Anytime. Appreciate you having me.
And a reminder to everybody, we want to give Ron Paul a big, cheerful day on his 90th birthday. So we're having a big barbecue celebration in Lake Jackson, Texas, where he lives, the place that he represented for all those terms in Congress. We want it to be big, and we want it to be very warm for him. So speaking of warm, it's going to be held indoors. So if you're worried about barbecue in Texas in August, that doesn't sound like a good idea. So check out the details. I'm going to be there. A whole bunch of people you remember from the old Ron Paul days will be there. It's going to be like a giant family reunion. So check that out at ronpaulbbq.com. And I hope to see you there. And thanks so much for listening.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com, and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.